What the hell is happening to the world today? Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're a new viewer. I'm Professor Geek, and we're going to talk about this Thundercats and related franchise reboot fiascos today. It's offensive on a couple different levels. So on the one hand, and I'm not really going to dwell on this level because a lot of people are doing that out there already, and I don't need to just be another video to that. I want to add something new. But yes, as a fan of Thundercats, I grew up on Thundercats and He-Man and loved those types of cartoons. And as a young child, I mean, I was 4, 5 watching He-Man that I can remember, and Thundercats and such. So it is very offensive as a fan, as a child who those stories and characters meant a great deal to now see them just so deconstructed and turned into such figures of ridicule now, because that really what it is. The producer can say that he's honoring the characters all he wants, but no, he's mocking them. That's what this is. So yeah, it's offensive in that manner. But what I want to dwell on in this video is how concerning this phenomena is, just as a member of society, as a member of our culture, because it's part of a bigger problem, and that is that younger generations find it incredibly difficult nowadays to follow a narrative, a deep narrative, to really follow a story. They have a lot of trouble with that. They can't emotionally engage with stories to any such depth. Now, I'm being general, of course. Of course, there are many young people who are very much into these kinds of stories, and I know this. I'm speaking from my experience as a college professor. So I teach undergraduate college courses, students anywhere from 17, 18 to 22, 23, and I see the whole spectrum of students. Every semester I do have some that really engage with the material and really impress me, and that's great. But they are the exceptions. The rule is the majority of people, they do not read anymore. That's a given. Probably isn't the case for many who watch my channel, because if you watch my channel, I'm all about stories and mythology and following and analyzing and delving into this type of stuff. So whether you're from an older generation or a younger one, if you watch my channel, you're probably not one of the people I'm talking about, but I'm sure you know them. And I just want to give you some examples, and then I'll point to how we see this manifesting in culture and in the stories as well. Thundercats is just a small part of that. But these are some examples. First of all, look at the types of cartoons that children watch today, if they even watch cartoons. Most young children would rather watch YouTube videos of somebody else playing with toys or opening blind bags or something like that, rather than actually follow a show, an animated show with a storyline, with characters to be invested in and to have something at stake and so forth. They would rather watch a YouTube video. It requires very little attention span. The children of my friends, neurotypical children everywhere, would much rather watch these YouTube videos than watch a show that actually has a story that they have to follow and engage in, for the most part. And that's really concerning, because I see what that culminates in with the students in my college classes. And again, I know a lot of my students are viewers of my channel, and that's great. If you bother to subscribe and watch my channel, then you're definitely not one of the ones I'm talking about here. You're probably one of the exceptions and ones that have impressed me a great deal. But for the most part, it's like pulling teeth to get students to read a book, an assigned reading, that is an actual story, is a piece of literature. I teach classes on the great works of literature, and I shape them around hero stories so I can bring superheroes into it and everything. But the class is a great works of literature class. It's literature based. And at the end of each semester, it never fails. I have 2 or 3 when they fill out the course evaluations at the end of the semester. And is there anything you would improve about the class? There's always 1 or 2 that says, maybe not so much reading. Are you kidding me? Where do you think you are? I understand that people do have different brain types, and that some people like to engage in the abstract a lot more than others. So reading is a hobby that some people enjoy a lot more than others. But just in general now, students do not like to read, or at least to read the in-depth material. And not even just reading, but even watching. I mean, I hear this all the time on campus. People say, I don't like movies. I just don't like movies. I'll watch a TV show, but movies are just... Because they have to sit there. They have to shut up. And if they're going to follow it and get anything out of it and not be lost, they have to leave their phone alone for 2 whole hours and pay attention and follow this narrative and invest in the characters or whatever. And they're unable to do that. They no longer have the psychological, intellectual tools to be able to do that. There have been some scientific studies. I'll try and find this one study that I'm thinking of in particular and put the link in the comments section, but where brain scientists have noticed that the human brain for people nowadays is not as able to focus on a single thing for a longer period of time as the human brain used to. Now, in exchange for that, we've developed better skills at being able to multitask and look at and engage in a couple of different things at a time. But this is because of looking at the phones, looking at social media and whatnot, and being able to carry on a conversation while you're sort of reading this one story over here and you're checking out some pictures from this other page over here. That's the kind of practice that has created this phenomena in our brains. And again, that's in general, but it's certainly there. And I understand that culture changes, and I understand that schedules, I mean, certainly your average college student today has so much more on their plate and much more demands on their schedules than in periods past. So I will say, hey, if you want to read this one as an audiobook and just listen to it while you're doing whatever, that's fine. I don't care. We're going to talk about the story. However you want to get the story, however works for you, that's fine. But it's just a matter of paying attention to it and engaging with it that's difficult for so many young people these days. I watch a few movies during the semester of my class, and we analyze them and pick apart the scenes and look for visuals and talk about the mythological implications and so forth. And I joke, but it's true. Every time I start a film, 5 people need to get up and use the restroom. Seriously, within the first 10 minutes of a movie, at least 5 people have gotten up to go use the restroom. That doesn't happen when I'm just lecturing. If I just lecture, they sit there. I don't imagine for a second that everybody in the class is paying attention to what I'm saying, but it's easier to drift off and tune out when someone's just talking to you. If a film's going on and you're in the room, it demands your attention. It's a little harder. Students have trouble. They can't engage. They can't pay attention to a long narrative. I have to constantly stop and explain what's going on. And they have a lot of trouble with the emotional beats as well. Again, I'm speaking in general. I show a number of great movies throughout my courses during a semester, and each one I have students who do engage and enjoy it quite a bit. But just in general, I have never had more class-wide engagement from a film than I did when I showed Thor Ragnarok. Why is that? Well, because Thor Ragnarok is a comedy. It doesn't require you to pay attention to the plot all that much to enjoy it. You can still just sort of laugh at the things that are funny. And it does not at all require emotional engagement from you. It really doesn't. Even in the scenes that are necessarily weighty with emotion, the film cracks a joke very quickly afterwards. And now this isn't a critique of Thor Ragnarok, the film, because I did like the film quite a bit. It's a critique of the genre of comedy nowadays that Thor Ragnarok was playing into. One example, and this is a spoiler for Thor Ragnarok, so jump ahead about a minute if you don't want to hear this. But at the end of Thor Ragnarok, you have the Asgardians on the ship escaping the destruction of their home, and there's this brief camera pan across their faces as they watch their home just completely, utterly destroyed. And that's a heavy moment. That deserved a good, solid emotional beat. But no, before you can even begin to process that, here comes Korg, big funny rock guy with a joke. And let's laugh instead. Let's not feel anything. Let's just laugh. And I see this over and over again. This is the only way to keep a student's attention, or a young person's attention in general today. You can't request too much from them. You can't request too much self-searching, too much insight, too much attention, period, emotional or intellectual. They just don't have it to give. And that's incredibly concerning. So what does that have to do with Thundercats? Well, because Thundercats was a wonderful show, and it was rebooted for a time years ago, and it was rebooted. It looked a little different. You had some purists who didn't like it or whatever, but it was still true to the spirit of what the show was. You still had a good, solid story being told, emotional engagement with these characters. There was mythological representations of the masculine and the feminine, and that's important. That's important in the mythological tales we tell ourselves. It's not a statement about social politics. It's just an important psychological truth. We need to see symbols of the masculine and the feminine. These sort of androgenized, non-binary types of characters, they don't cut it in the mythological realm because our subconscious isn't attuned to that. It has nothing to do with politics or social platforms. It's just a psychological truth. if we're going to develop however we're going to develop, we need certain symbols to work from. And the new Thundercats has just infantilized all of these characters and their designs. That's that animation style. I don't like the animation style, but it's been done to good effect in certain places here or there. I hear Adventure Time. I don't really spend a lot of time with that show, but I hear that it's got quite the universe built through it. I still don't think it's doing quite the work of cartoons that have come before it. But my point is, it's not just a matter of taste in animation. It's a matter of how this representation of these characters and their lack of story is being presented to the public. I watched the little video short. Victor Courtwright here is the young producer of this show, claiming to love Thundercats and to have watched it as a child. And he's there with his little man bun, top knot kind of thing there. Seeing him and hearing him talk, it almost looked like a Saturday Night Live sketch. I mean, I was thinking, is this a joke? This has to be a joke. They have to be trolling people who don't like this kind of treatment of their characters and whatnot. I mean, there is a whole movement, the soy boy phenomena or whatever as people call it and such. So I thought clearly this is a video just kind of trolling that, or it's a joke. But no, it's not a joke. And if you listen to what he says and the things that he gets excited about when he's trying to explain what the show is, the first point is comedy, because you need comedy to keep people engaged. You can't do it with a narrative. You can't do it with emotion. You need to have them laugh and comedy and be light and fluffy and whatever. And he even says that the nature of Thundercats universe lends itself to comedy. Do you understand fantasy? Do you understand mythology? I mean, you can make comedy out of anything, so to speak, but nothing about that necessarily lends itself to comedy unless you really work to make it that and to mock it and make it funny. So comedy is what he's first all excited about. And then he says action. Action, 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 because if things are exploding and things are whatever, you don't need narrative, you don't need emotional engagement to think how cool it is that something big and explosive happened. So again, playing into that shallow, intellectual, emotional level of engagement that young people are capable of today. Comedy, action, where's the story? The only time he mentions story is when he talks about how it lends itself to comedy, how it's funny, how it shouldn't be taken too seriously, how it's easily mocked. This is ridiculous. In mythological terms, our culture doesn't have a Trojan War like the ancient Greeks had. We don't have a Knights of the Round Table like historical Britain had. And what I mean by that is that we don't have agreed upon stories in our American culture today, or just Western culture in general. We don't have an agreed upon set of stories that everybody in our society believes in the veracity of. Our mythologies are no longer linked to our religions because we live in a culture of multiple religions. So a single religious narrative no longer holds our society together today in terms of values, anxieties, aspirations, what's expected of you in behavior and general day-to-day interactions in society and so forth. That's what mythology does. That's what mythology does for culture. It inculcates people with those common values. So we need mythologies that we know are fiction. We acknowledge that these are fictional stories we tell ourselves, but they need to do the work of mythology. And that means they need to be taken seriously. So to take something like Thundercats, which isn't an ubiquitous franchise, not everybody knows and loves Thundercats, but to the people who did watch it and enjoy it, it often means something quite special, or it achieved some crucial work within their psyches, whether they know it or not, growing up at those impressionable ages and watching characters who show what strength and protection and loyalty and justice is on the screen and working that out in their subconscious. That's important. And to take characters like that and to make them cutesy and put them into the sort of LOL, so random comedy and androgynize them, mock them, this is going to have cultural implications. And I'm not trying to be too hyperbolic. I'm not saying that the Thundercats cartoon alone is going to be the downfall of society. Of course not. Of course not. But this phenomenon of ripping down and tearing down and deconstructing characters and stories that do this important psychological work and cultural work within our society, this phenomenon of tearing those things down and no longer allowing them to have the crucial effect that they have, that is going to have major repercussions. Because we're building a world full of people who are unable to emotionally engage, to empathize, to turn inward and take a look at themselves and figure out why they're feeling the way they are reacting the way they are. What do they love? What do they fear? If you can't engage in that basic level of self-analysis, then you create a society of indifference. And in some individuals, you create a time bomb, unable to process different things that have happened to them, or drives and fears, tensions, and so forth that they might have. And those people become the ticking time bombs that explode in the sea of indifference. And the indifference will always just sort of swell back over it until the next one explodes. That's, in general, the phenomena that we see happening now, and that's what's going to continue to happen. So I've tried to keep this video in line with the channel's mission statement here of looking at our popular stories as mythology and what they do, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and so forth. But yeah, aside from that, I'm deeply enraged with this as a Thundercats fan, and it's just insulting to see him there in that video talk about how I've always loved Thundercats and I'm a fan and this is the Thundercats series I want. And both of those statements can't be true. So I want to know if you've seen this video. I'm not even going to link it because it's disgusting, but you can find the new Thundercats info out there anywhere you want. And let me know what you think about the new Thundercats treatment in general, but also the whole phenomenon, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and their new treatment that they're receiving, the Teen Titans Go, turning to that from Young Justice in the original Teen Titans show was just such a blow. There are so many more examples of this out there, and it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous for the Masters of the Universe film, which is a very different thing because we're talking a film for more adults, not a children's cartoon, but I am still planning on talking about that soon. So let me know your thoughts on this, and until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper and taking seriously the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.